Hello, you are listening to Jump and Shoot, a gaming podcast. Today is Wednesday, January 27th, 2021, and we are continuing on with our Sidequests mini-series, which are a series of discussion-based, quick-fire, off-the-cuff mini podcast episodes about, well, the topic is kind of decided the minute of, sort of. And I'm your host, Joey, and I'm joined today by Kelly, Mississippi Science, and Kevin of Press Start to Continue. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Me first?
You first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kevin from a rather new rebranded channel, Press Start to Continue. Been on YouTube for over 10 years, formerly known as the Mega Man Cave. Do retrospectives, analysis videos, and other gaming histories. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, man. And just a quick reminder, many moons ago, when Jump and Shoot first started, Kevin and I did a couple. I did like a guest spot on your channel, I believe,
Yep.
and you came on our podcast to talk about.
We reciprocated.
It's tit for tat, whatever that means.
I really don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means either. I just it's what it is. Kelly, how about yourself?
Yeah, I don't have anything anywhere near as structured or respectable as what you guys have. I do some loose perler bead art and just kind of lurk on Twitter. It's really, really fascinating stuff here. But I have been a huge Earthbound fan since right about when it came out. I was lucky enough to have a Super Nintendo as a kid and remember just being blown away by it, even with my tiny, puny, undeveloped brain.
What you guys don't know is that we just have Kelly on here for her soothing NPR voice because I failed to deliver on that, just too nasally. Okay, so Kelly actually just divulged the topic, and it is Earthbound. That is what we have decided. So, Kevin, tell us about Earthbound. Why is this game good? Why are we talking about it?
Oh, man. Well, where to start? A long time ago, a little boy named Kevin lived in a 2-bedroom house in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, and I was gifted a game in a huge box, and it was called Earthbound for the Super Nintendo back in the 90s. And when I got the game, I was used to platformer games back then, being pretty young. Popped the game in. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was boring. I didn't understand the jokes, and I put it away for a long time. Well, come to find out, our attic, which is where most of the games went that I didn't play anymore, in our house, actually got flooded out from rain, and the only game that survived, at least in working condition, was Earthbound. So when I started to get back into video games again, I popped it in, and I was a little bit older, late middle school, early high school age, started playing it, and something about the game just made me fall in love with it. The quirkiness, the art style, the humor, literally everything about it was just, maybe I was a hipster. I think I was a hipster before hipsters were hipsters.
It was cool.
I thought it was cool. I'm like, hey, have you heard of this game? And everybody's like, I'm really playing the GameCube right now, or I'm playing the PS2 right now, and I was stuck on Earthbound. I thought it was great, and over the years, I've tried to do like one playthrough a year, and my love for it has grown. And not just in Earthbound, but even the entire Mother series as a whole. I think the messages that it sends in the game they transcend a lot of RPGs for its time. And it's just such a unique game. So that's my story behind why I love Earthbound.
That's a really good story, actually. I like the delayed onset of your appreciation for it too. I always love hearing stories like that because there have been a lot of games that that you play once and they don't really resonate, and then they come back, and it's like you have this strange dynamic with it then, where it was something that you've grown to appreciate. It's like an arranged marriage versus a romantic marriage. So that's where we are. That's where we are.
Yeah, it's my two favorite games of all time are Earthbound and Near Replicant, and both games I hated when I first played them. So
I still kind of think I hate Near Replicant. So there you go.
you gotta watch my retrospective; it'll change your life.
I definitely will. I haven't seen it actually. Usually I am a sub to your channel, and I have been for a while, and I should do that. Kelly, how about you? What is your Earthbound-ing?
Oh man, I remember being very young, probably definitely in elementary school, definitely before 12, because it was still the first house that I ever lived in. And we had our Super Nintendo like just game set up in the back bedroom. And every Saturday, every Sunday, I would go in and try to play a game or two or whatever. And there were four that were always on rotation for me. And I started each of these games like so many times, and I finished some of them a couple of times, but Earthbound, I feel like every time I started, I'd play all the way through. Those games were Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy at the time 2, in reality 4, and Final Fantasy at the time 3, in reality 6. And I just remember starting up and like going through the character creation aspects and just getting really sucked into it. And then I might like lose patience with those as a little kid sometimes, but I just feel like I never lost it with Earthbound and would just get sucked into it over and over and over again. I can't even count how many times I played that as a kid. Um, I took kind of a hiatus from gaming after I moved to Oklahoma, of all places, and got back into it once I moved out of Oklahoma. It was kind of a weird coincidence. And I remember coming back to Earthbound as like a college kid at this point and being just as like smitten with it and like blown away by how smart and funny and bright and vivid and just incredible the story was. And it was just nice to come back to something that I liked so much as a kid, as an adult, and still feel that same like level of connection with it.
I'm about to out hipster y'all and say that I always thought Earthbound was cool. I remember seeing the Nintendo Power ads and stuff for it, and there was like a brief marketing campaign for it that was kind of pushed, but probably not nearly as strongly or in the right way as Nintendo should have done. But I mean, I have to give them credit for trying something a little bit new with that marketing campaign, and we can talk about that in a sec. But like, I just like I think the first game that I really truly felt like I loved was probably Link to the Past, and then right after that was FF2 or 4, FF4, and so like Earthbound was a logical continuation of that, and then FF6 had come out, and I had played through that, and Lufia and a couple other RPGs here and there. So it was like going into Earthbound was like, it was familiar territory, but it was weird as hell because of it's weird as hell, and in a good way. So for those of you who may not know, when this game came out in the U.S., it was never sold individually. It came in a package with a player's guide and a big manual and all that, because it was it was considered to be like a confusing game for American audiences, and because it came out in a time when the JRPG or even RPG market was still pretty niche, and I guess they just didn't really know how to market it because it was just such a different take on a genre that was already not really quite understood. So their approach to that was to just make it weird. The big tagline was "This game stinks." It had like green blob, smelly looking Nickelodeon goo on it, right? Yeah, Kevin, help me out here. There's so much to say about this.
Yeah, what's funny is if you look back through some interviews, at its core, the game's creator Shigesato Itoi is kind of a Renaissance man in Japan, where he's not really a video game he's not involved in the video game industry as his full-time profession, right? He's been on Iron Chef Japan. He's written books. He's done odds and ends in the entertainment industry. So really his eclectic personality was kind of brought out in the creation of the Mother series. You saw it a little bit in the NES and the creation of Mother, but I don't think he really got to see everything to fruition that he wanted to until the Super Nintendo, the Super Famicom version was able to be created. What's funny, something that I learned from listening to some of his interviews is that he wanted to make a game that was unlike a lot of RPGs. Normally, if you talk to some characters or NPCs in RPGs, they'll eventually tell you what you need to do. If you notice by playing Earthbound, it doesn't hold your hand in that same respect. And
Yeah,
it's pretty
no.
realistic. You know, if you were in that environment, right, you're just some random kid, other than Buzz at the beginning of the game telling you, oh my gosh, I was sent here to make sure you know to stop Gygas, all these things, right? Most of the characters don't really tell you to do anything. So that was kind of his vision, and to make the game weird. It was really kind of a limb for Nintendo to go out on, and I really couldn't see them doing something like that today.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but back then that was a big move, and it kind of paid off in the long run, but certainly not in the short term.
I'm trying to think of like a good analogy for his Itoi's personality, cultural personality would be, and I'm thinking like almost like Anthony Bourdain, but weirder, or like a poppier Anthony Bourdain.
Wholesomer, like a little bit more wholesome almost. Like
Yeah.
he also played the original voice actor for Satsuki's father in My Neighbor Totoro. So that that connection was always a weird little like, oh, two of my favorite things have this one weird little tie through.
No, I did. That's interesting. I did not know that. Yeah, and it's weird because I feel like because we didn't get Mother 1 here until Earthbound Beginnings came out for the Wii U. And so like there's sort of a hot topic about in the Mother discourse that like Earthbound is sort of a remake of Mother 1, which I don't think it is, but there is definitely a sort of like meta sequel to it in a lot of ways where it's like purposely ambiguous, it's purposely like revisionist. A lot of the same areas or scenarios happen, but like it always begs the question of, is history repeating? Is it just a different take? Is it a parallel world? It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because like the experience is the same. It's not the same experience, but it's the same brand, just in a different form, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I did a video last year about kind of, it didn't really tie in Mother 1 and Mother 2, but it was the history of Gygas, which is the villain in Mother 2, and kind of the origin of how he came about. I did way more research into the topic than I care to mention, but you can kind of, I won't give away any spoilers or anything, but you can kind of link the two games together in the case of the villain. But Itoi himself, like, he's pretty cryptic about a lot of stuff when it comes to the plot lines and how the games intertwine. About the only thing that I would say that he's pretty firm on is the fact that Gygas isn't in Mother 3. He's pretty firm on that, but I think that aspect of it has let the lore of the series kind of run wild, in subreddits and other forums. So it's pretty cool.
I'm going to say something relatively controversial about Mother, the series, and also video games in general. Plot doesn't really matter that much because, what is Earthbound's plot? It doesn't really quite, I mean, yeah, it has a plot, of course, it has a plot. But, like, I mean, it's disjointed, it's kind of sporadic, it's punctuated. It doesn't really, because it doesn't matter. It's about, like, the journey and the atmosphere. And, like, there's very clear story beats, obviously. But, like, it's sort of, it feels a lot more like a more modern story than most of the other things that were being told. in the 90s, and not just because it was like hipper and like in a contemporary setting, but because like it had that like self-awareness that like what the story that it's telling doesn't matter because it's so silly and wacky. It's about like the moments that you create with these characters and these events that matter. And I feel like that's why it's so ridiculous and why it gets away with being ridiculous. That's why you're able to have like a village full of short little whisker guys with bows, and then now a dude falls off a building and talks in iambic pentameter, and you stumble through an alternate dimension, and then you like abort the fetus of your enemy. Like, like there's so many weird different things in that story that like, it didn't really have to make sense because it was about like the spectacle of it, I guess. You don't see that ever anymore.
No, you always see, I mean, especially nowadays with social media and everything. I mean, somebody's going to find something wrong to say about every single video game. Back, I don't want to call myself like a Zoomer, but back in the day in the 90s, I was happy to get any game that I had. And kind of like you said earlier, it's like, you had these 4 games, right? And you kind of played them over and over again. I mean, that's how I felt, where I would get a game, I'd rent a game, and I'd have to play the heck out of that game. I wasn't going to go download something, but at the same respect, the plot, I didn't really criticize too much, right?
Yeah.
The plot in Earthbound is pretty generic, and a kid and some friends that he doesn't even know are friends meet up, and they have to tackle this crazy villain to save the world. Okay, that's a pretty generic plot, but the atmosphere of Earthbound is really where the game, that's where a lot of the cult following comes from, because it is so weird.
Totally. And I think
that
go ahead, sorry.
Plot-wise, like looking at it as a whole, it's not as satisfying as looking at the specific parts, like looking town by town at the stories that are told at a more granular level. I think that's where a lot of the power and like strength and vividness of the game comes from. But like if you try to sum it up in a sentence of the whole story, it just falls flat. The attention to detail and the small little things that really come together to build the whole are really what set it apart for me.
Yeah, rather than just being one, two, or and three, it's like a time signature or whatever. That's my analogy.
Everybody, all the NPCs, they have something to say. It may not make any sense, but they have their own personality, and their dialogue doesn't exist just to propel the story forward, or to propel the narrative forward.
Yeah, and you see that with Pokemon as well, at least the first couple games, because they had some of the developers who worked on the Mother series work on early Pokemon. So, I mean, like, I feel like, that legacy did extend a little bit further, maybe than some people realize. And just the idea of incorporating banality or a lot of mundane or silly things into a plot in a centric way was incredibly unique with Earthbound, because it's like, like one of your things is like you have to help this inventor kid you have to get a giant eraser. It's like the MacGuffins are silly and self-aware, and just like little things, like your weapons are yo-yos and baseball bats. They're not like grand epic things like swords. Yeah, okay, that's a thing in it. Sure, the Sword of Kings, but like it's like later in the game, and it's also kind of aware of itself and so on. So it's like now you start to see that a little bit more. It's why a game like Undertale can do so well now, or like something that's like a little bit sillier, but like Cosmic Star Heroine or Saturday Morning RPG, like stuff like that. Things like those games exist now. Even like Oddworld or a million other things I can think of was like those. I don't know if those games would have really been able to be sold without like Earthbound or Mother kind of stepping in, I guess. Showing
something's got to lay the groundwork, I mean, there's plenty of weird games on the NES and the Atari, but I feel like the Super Nintendo was really the first system that was able to not only take a weird game, but also have enough stuff in the game to really make it cool and not just be like, wow, that's weird, or wow, that really didn't age well on the NES. I mean, as a lot of people say, the Super Nintendo is probably the first timeless system that was ever made. And that, I think that holds true with a lot of those games like Earthbound.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think my only thing now is like people going to Earthbound for the first time in 2021, or like younger audiences playing it for the first time. And I feel like I always bring up this subject because I'm an old man, but I find it fascinating because I feel like younger audiences now would either completely embrace it, and in a way they do because Undertale was so big and it's like the prototypical Undertale in a lot of ways. So it's like, it's easy for some younger folks to I guess connect with in that sense, but at the same time some of the mechanics can seem dated. Your inventory is clunky, like the money system is hilarious and weird and not intuitive, and I'm really curious as to like people getting into video games for the first time now and hearing about this thing and like how it resonates, because I think like stuff like the dialogue is timeless. It's so ahead of its time. It was like a political satire and commentary in a way that wasn't like completely on the nose, or like in a way that wasn't like forced. Like it never feels like it's trying to teach you something. It rather than like trying to be didactic, it just tries to be illustrative and silly, and like that's comedy. That's like what the essence of comedy is. And
yeah. I mean, you're thrown into the world. You're not really there. The game is not meant to take any jabs at current, I guess, current social items or anything that's there in the present. It really, you're dropped into the world. You're kind of a fly on the wall, and you're just trying to discover everything that's going on. And you're exactly right. It's timeless in that respect. But as far as people that are younger discovering Earthbound, I will say a lot of the comments that I get, and I'm not a big channel by any means of the imagination, but a lot of my Earthbound videos have a lot. Yeah, well, let's see. A lot of the Earthbound videos I have a lot of views, and I think that speaks volumes for the series. And there's a lot of younger individuals, and I'm not going to label them based on their screen names or anything like that on YouTube, but you can kind of get a vibe on the younger folk of YouTube leaving comments on the video, and there's a lot of new people discovering Earthbound, and I don't know if it's the hype for, oh, this game is really expensive, it must be good, or this game has a lot of really weird theories behind it, let me check it out. I just think it's cool that in 2021 we have younger people going back and playing the game that existed before they were alive.
Yeah, you know what? You brought up a really good point too that I want to circle back to, and you said that you mentioned like the fly in the wall feeling. I think that Earthbound is, I mean, Mother in general, but Earthbound especially, is very much a Japanese fly on the wall of American culture. I mean, you have jabs at police brutality, at gang violence in the first town, and these are concepts that like, the Japanese don't, I mean, there's obviously gangs and stuff, but like the way that it's depicted in the game is a very Americanized view of those things. And so like, it almost feels like Japan's attempt to sort of like commentate politically almost on American stuff, but while also being like, we don't really know. That's why this is silly, And I think that's a really interesting. I feel like if something like that were made now, like if the reverse of that were true, it would get criticized for being like insensitive or something like that. And maybe that's why we don't have Mother 3. I don't know.
Yeah. I won't go into that.
Yeah, no, that's another episode, I think.
Yeah, to your point, Joey, about the kind of satirical nature of Earthbound on Western society from a Japanese lens, like the the references that they make are very kind of goofy and silly. There's a lot of like little Beatles Easter eggs here and there. A lot of
Oh
like even
yeah.
like places, things like Frank Zappa and like Brian Eno come through even in different places. But overall, I think that it just kind of getting lost in like the zany parts of Western culture and putting those like, oh yeah, the police brutality, absent fathers,
Oh yeah.
capitalism,
Yeah,
just kind
absolutely.
of sinks in there in a less obtrusive kind of way. But I do have a lot of curiosity as to how like younger American audiences take Earthbound versus younger Japanese audiences.
Mm.
Because as we know, since Earthbound came out, a lot of our political issues have not changed. We haven't really moved away from those kinds of things. So I feel like there is still a lot of like connection to some of those things in a modern day sense as an American. And even at the time in the 90s, the references were from like older bands, older things. And it feels still kind of like that classic sense more so than like, oh, like they're not referencing like Nirvana or like these
Right.
high key 90s bands.
Yeah, it's like that, and obviously a big part of the aesthetic is Americana, and it's like that kind of Americana that I think will still be relevant in 10, 15 years. Like when people even younger than now are playing it. But is there any scene in Earthbound that really feels most prescient or poignant or whatever to you, Kelly?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that a lot of the emotion of the game really culminates when you're in the dream world, when you're reflecting back on the experiences you've had over the course of the game and seeing it all in this like even more surreal light than was already presented. Um, and then in a different sense, the I guess we could call it the post game part of it, where again you're in this moment of reflection. You're seeing um, this kind of built-in nostalgia take place, and it I remember as a kid it hitting the same kind of emotional tenor as like thinking back to I don't know the previous summer or now as like a 32-year-old woman like looking back at
Age
a
reveal.
10-year-old baby Kelly like getting such delight from this game. It's one of the few things that I really can like consistently tap into to just have that like little flutter of excitement and nostalgia.
Mm-hmm. How about you,
And I
Kevin?
think that even in the game, it's there.
That she hit the nail on the head. I was literally gonna say, um, you know, Magicant and the areas of the game where Ness really goes back to look at all these people in his life and things he's encountered along the way, and even into Mother 3. There's a very specific part of Mother 3 where there's a yo-yo that Lucas and his friends uncover. Um, uh, Basically, it's an homage to Ness and Porky's relationship with Ness, and that's something I've always really found kind of interesting too. Is um, whether or not when Itoi made the game, whether or not he wanted Porky to be kind of the representation of an American child.
Mm-hmm.
He was blonde, he was chubby, he was jealous, he was competitive, but he really just wanted to be Ness's friend at the end of the day. And just that part of the story, I never understood why Porky was doing what he was doing when I was younger playing the game. But the more and more I think about it, and again, another video I did is Porky evil or not? That part kind of resonates with me because it's a part of the game you don't really catch if you're just playing it through once. But the more you think about it, it's just like, wow, that part really resonated with me, and some of the dialogue and some of the things you uncover throughout the game.
I think I have an answer to your question. And I think he is evil because look at his brother. I feel like that's why he has a brother, to show nature and nurture. You know, like his brother, like not the greatest dude, not the greatest dude, but like you know, he's like the light side and Porky is the dark side, right? And I feel like that goes to, maybe that's supposed to, I don't know if it was like intentional in the moment, but it does sort of maybe illustrate the point that maybe Porky's kind of a fucker. You know, like maybe he's purposely a fucker, which he is, an ultimate fucker. But you know, like you can't really. He's almost sympathetic in some ways, and I feel like that dichotomy between Porky and Ness is definitely like representative also of going back to the thing we were talking about before with like Japanese, the Americana in a Japanese lens, like the light side, like the 90s like kid who's like, he finds himself in trouble and he gets into trouble and he's like, he loves his friends and like, but he's a good guy who says nothing for some reason. And then Porky, who's just like, you know, chubby and spoiled and full of all of it. So yeah, that's my take. What's that?
He gets beat though.
He does get beat. He does get beat. Yes. Does he deserve it?
I mean, he may have left the house in the middle of the night. I would never hit my kids, but you know, that's a personal.
Yeah. I wouldn't hit my kids if they left in the middle of the night, but if they made an army of pig Nazis, I'd probably whoop them a little bit. I think that's corporal. That's where I draw the line at corporal punishment. Is pig Nazis. I think that's as far as I go.
Pig Nazi army with hot dog sushi. Yeah, it's time for a spanking, dude.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, it's so hard to talk about Porky without considering Mother 3 though, and I would kind of not want to do that because it's like, I feel like his character definitely sort of changed to something a little different after Mother 2 or Earthbound. So yeah, I don't know.
That's a whole another rabbit hole.
Yeah. It's just like, what a fascinating character. Probably one of Nintendo's most interesting characters. What's his last name? Munch? Minch. There it is. Yeah. Gross. Gross name.
Yeah, I liked the subtle ambiguity of Porky's character because you don't know how much is him specifically as a shitty little kid and how much is him just responding to like this evil influence that is affecting the world in general, and how much of it is just like this or like an innate evil within him. It could be any of it.
That's a really good point.
And they do lean into it at one point where he's like, "Oh, dude, I don't know what came over me. We're still friends, right, buddy?" And then you're like, "Oh, maybe you're not so bad." ...
Yeah, that's good that you bring that up. That's a really important translational difference between the Japanese version too and the American version, or the NTSC version, is that scene where he kidnaps Paula and you catch up to him. I think the difference is in the English version, I think he says something like, "Oh yeah, I just kind of want to be your friend," and then he says, "Oh sucker," or something like that, and then he runs away. I think there's a difference there too in the translation between the Japanese and the English, and I don't know if that was intentional or not. I'm sure I could figure it out if I read the book, the 400-page book that came out with the differences between the translations, but it's interesting.
Oh my gosh, the localization for this game looked like it was a very intense undertaking.
Yeah.
The amount of care, effort, and thought that went into making a satire of Western culture also like hit home in the right way for a Western audience. Like, I think it really just chef's kiss hit perfect.
It's a really interesting aberration of a localization too, because during this time, a lot of localizations were very rushed or like quickly decided, and the market for that, the economy for Japanese to English localizations, especially in context of RPGs, was it wasn't fully understood, and it was clumsy. Like, I mean, it's the reason why you have like Final Fantasy VI getting translated in, what is it, 6 weeks, or the whole game's entire translation was done in 6 weeks, and as opposed to something like Earthbound, which took a long time to localize. But there was probably, yeah, like Kelly said, there's like a lot of careful consideration in things like, maybe should we censor this, or maybe not censor this, but how do we address this to a way that makes sense to an audience that, like, it was almost written in satire of. So there's, like, I can only imagine.
Does child be?
Yeah. How much cleavage is? No, I'm kidding.
It was very intentional, though, if you think about it, because you look at, like you said, with Ness being naked or not naked, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you get rid of something like Dr. Saturn from Mother 2. But then at the same time, you keep in the entire Gygas battle at the end, exact same between both versions, which somehow made it as a K to A game on the Super Nintendo, which still baffles me because that boss battle is terrifying still to me. But I think people can read the book. There's tons of pages online on starman.net for the localization changes, but it's got to be very intentional based on the time they took.
Yeah, for sure. And man, how do you talk about Earthbound without talking about that final battle, man? I'll say one thing that's not really a spoiler and it's more general. I think people do try to find meaning in things where there maybe isn't any meaning, because I feel like a big part of that final battle is the tone and not like the message behind it so much. Like, people always, like, they always quote that the famous quote about him walking in on like a rape scene in a movie and then using that as like inspiration for Gygas, and he's like, not really, that's not really the thing, and it gets taken out of context. And then you see stuff on forum that's like, oh, Gygas is like, it's like a rape being, like video game eyes. That's what it's supposed to represent. And it's like, no, it's just supposed to be an abstract thing. So I feel like if you go down too far in that rabbit hole, you start to see things that may not be there. You start to like overanalyze something that maybe is not worth it in that sense. So,
Itoi has disproved the fetus theory.
Mm-hmm.
He did say, and this kind of holds true, this is actually a good kind of lead up to a video I'm going to be doing on my new channel, and exploring the Mother 3 unused boss, the unused boss in Mother 3. Itoi always wanted to create the final boss of both Mother 2 and Mother 3 to be as terrifying as possible. Whether or not that had a direct correlation with that scene he described, that he accidentally walked into the wrong theater and saw things he shouldn't have seen, that's never really been proven. I mean, he did talk about, he did see that, and that kind of led to him thinking about, oh man, how disturbing can I make this? But there's just too many theories out there. Is it creepy? Yeah, it's creepy.
Definitely.
Yeah,
it is. But as for the reason, we may never really know until I, sit down one-on-one with Itoi one day, which will never happen because, I don't live in Japan, and it's getting harder to get over there now, especially with COVID. But, one day we may know.
and at that same time, do you really want to, though? Like, there's something that's like, there's something that's lost in artistic translation if it's, perfectly explained, I think.
Yeah, I think that the way that I've liked to think of that final battle is almost like a workshop or an inkblot test for yourself. Like what you might interpret it as during one playthrough might be different the next playthrough as well. Like it really does an excellent job of reflecting the kind of like tensions, anxieties, and fears and pain that you have inside yourself, like a very blank, staticky, loose canvas.
I think Earthbound does a lot of that. I think that's why you have stuff like Mr. Saturn, who you can't like fully read what they're saying. You know, like there's always like there's Earthbound leaves you a breadcrumb trail, but it doesn't, give you the loaf.
Yeah.
I hated that. I hated that I said that, but I said it.
Your face.
I realized what I was saying as I said it. Speaking of loaves, there's a lot of poop and pee jokes in this game, and burping jokes, slime jokes. That was a big part of the marketing that we were talking about earlier. Man, was like, I feel like that's it betrays the spirit of the game because I don't really think it's like a vulgar game. Nintendo almost tried to market it like it was Little Timmy's Beavis and Butthead. And that's why we got scratch-and-sniff stickers.
Think about it as a commentary on American culture in the 90s. Like, all of what we had was like Nickelodeon, slime, nasty, gross kid stuff. Like, it felt pretty right on that front. And oh my god, those scratch and sniff stickers from the player's guide. Like, I feel like those scents have been embedded in my brain.
Oh yes.
I haven't smelled them in years, but I know exactly what they smell like.
I'm trying to think if I have mine down here or not. I kind of want to smell it again to see if I can smell it. About a year ago, I could still smell a little bit.
Yeah, ours still smell. Mine definitely do. So I was trying to show her on camera, but because my dog is sitting here, about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit less than that, I was outside with her, and I saw my dog grab something and then run in the house and like whimper and yell. And I was like, what the fuck is that smell? And what had happened was she had grabbed a skunk and wrecked it, and then the skunk sprayed her, and then she ran inside reeking of skunk. And like, I'd always smelled skunk from a distance, and it just smells like bad weed, It's not that bad from a distance, but I never smelled skunk that closely. And I realized that's what one of the stickers are.
Yeah.
Is skunk.
Fresh skunk juice.
Fresh skunk juice. And I was like, what a strange implanted memory, like a Manchurian candidate memory that did. Like, ooh, that was like in my head. And like, scent is tied to, like, is one of the strongest senses tied to senses. Scent is one of the strongest senses tied to memory. So it's like, damn, man. Thanks, Earthbound, prepping me. Sorry, I just wanted to share that.
No, I don't know. I still don't know what they were really thinking with that marketing campaign, but I don't know. I don't think that they really, although they did grasp the identity of the 90s, with Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life, that shows out like that honestly blow me away that we were able to watch that as kids. Looking back on it now, but I think they were trying to take a stab at things, but the game was even weirder than that. Maybe not as controversial in some respects as like Ren and Stimpy. Was pretty controversial with some of the stuff they did, but may have been even a little bit too weird for us.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of Earthbound stuff definitely went over my head. Because there's a lot of like innuendo and kind of a little pointed jokes in that game from NPCs and events that happen in it. That's like, I didn't realize how ahead of the curve it really was. And I wonder if like how, like, digesting that as a kid without fully understanding it, I wonder if that like, it's like having a baby listen to Mozart. Like it's like does that develop your brain in a different way? I don't know. Does playing Earthbound too young to understand it really?
Well, I'll tell you that there's some truth to that now. Now, not Mozart, but my son has been listening to audiobooks since he was 2, and he's reading like full-size novels now at 6. So
damn,
it does work. It can work.
It works, yeah. Yeah, I am not disputing that. That's sick. You should have him play Earthbound. Because when did it come out? 94, 95?
Originally 94 in Japan and then 95 in the US.
Okay, so I was almost his age when I first played it, because I remember I came home from school and it was on the kitchen table for me. Earthbound, the box. And then I somehow slipped into Brad Pitt and I was like, "What's in the box? Come on, Mom!" And then those terrible stickers. Yeah, that's my Jerry Seinfeld 7.
So speaking of that, I need to share a really quick story about the box. So my original copy of Earthbound, which I mentioned before, was like the only thing non-destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And it is because it was in a huge like what was the store? Big Lots. It was in a huge Big Lots bag that my mom put in there because she always used to love to go to Big Lots and buy a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't need. But anyway, that's besides the point. I took that box to Nintendo World, New York City, and actually got the box signed by Shigeru Miyamoto.
Oh, damn. You still have it?
But I sold it. Back when I was like 19 or 20 years old, because I had gotten out of video games for a little bit. But it's kind of an interesting thing because as soon as I put the box down, he looked at me and he kind of like gave a smirk like, I see what you're doing. That was like the coolest moment I had. And back then in eBay, back in those days, you didn't need to have, if you had like, an autograph on something, you thought it was a real autograph, right? You didn't have to have a proof of authenticity. You didn't have to have a picture of them signing it. All these other things that, with scammers and everything you have to have now. But I still wish I had that, because that was a really special moment that'll probably live in my memory, because the look on his face was just like, okay, I see you.
I think more important than the physical box, you have that memory though. And that's the like, this sounds corny, but that is really the thing that, like, you could look at the box every day and be reminded of it, but like, it's still, that memory is still clearer.
I waited several hours for that moment, so
it was worth it.
Worth it to me.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I still have all my stuff. Luckily, my Earthbound stuff. Knock on wood. I did have a sealed copy of Chrono Trigger that I sold a couple years ago, and that was like just going through that process of selling that. Like, oof. Like getting it graded, getting it certified, going back and forth, and then, that brings me to another point about this game, is that, like, it has such a reputation for being super expensive. I used to work at a retro game store, and we had a box copy of it that, I think it sold for $700. That's insane. That's insane.
It's different. It's another thing that speaks to Earthbound and how it is as a whole. It's a different game. It's a large box. What other SNES game had a large box?
Mario Paint.
Yep, Mario Paint. Any others?
Mario Paint 2. No, I don't know.
Not that I know of.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I can't think of any, really.
There might be another one, but I mean, it was just so different for people that, and that coupled with its cult following is, I mean, come on.
Huge,
and I don't want to talk about Mother 3 in depth right now, but just thinking of the juxtaposition between like the value of the hard copy of Earthbound and the complete and utter lack of an American hard copy of Mother 3, and like the ROM experience versus the like box cartridge player's guide, like tangible one.
Yeah, and I think Mother as a whole has that really unique multimedia experience in the West, because it's like you said, people who are fans of the series emulated Mother 3 and played it. And then it was the same with Mother 1 until it got ported. And I
have a Mother 1 experience. The first time I started playing that game was when I was in college, and Facebook had all of these extensions you could add on to it. So I had a NES like port through my Facebook that had all of the Nintendo games on it. And that's how I started trying to play Mother 1. It didn't go well. But I was so stoked.
To me, Mother 1 feels more like a more typical late 80s, early 90s RPG. And I think that Earthbound tried to innovate on that a little bit, because even though Earthbound's battle system is fairly generic in a way, it did have some interesting concepts. Like kind of not really fully explaining the spells to you. Whenever you got a new spell, you were like, what does that do? And trying to figure it out was a lot more involved. The rolling back number system, which added an element of like almost like ATB, real time action kind of thing to the game. Like just the way the sound design is in the combat is, I don't think that gets talked about enough, because the tempo of the text and the music like really matches with what's going on in the moment in a way that like is kind of intense for a game of that time period. And even though it's like relatively simplistically programmed, like you're at low HP, the music starts picking up, but like the way that the numbers dial down and the pace of the combat and like the speed of the animations, it works together in this like very interesting like waltz almost. And like I don't know how much of that was like actually programmed and how much of it is just the way things happen, but like that's just, it sticks with you, you know? It's like it's a feeling that you can't really replicate or explain in a lot of ways. So like combat, even though it's generic, it does like, it has one of the most unique feelings, I think, out of anything.
I feel like I got sick of the battles in my other Super Nintendo games much quicker than I did with Earthbound. I don't feel like there was ever a point in playing through that game where I was like, "Ugh, another encounter, I'm so annoyed." Like, as like maybe you would in like Final Fantasy VI, where you're like, okay, just fucking stop. I'm done with you. I don't want any more random encounters, please.
Well, that was on virtue of having on-map encounters too, which was also a rare thing. Because I mean, you had games like Chrono Trigger did, but the Chrono Trigger came out a couple years later, and then the Saga Romancing Saga games, they had on-map encounters, but they're handled differently than Earthbound, where it's like in Earthbound, it's like it's an environmental thing. The enemies are designed, I think, with more care to the environment than any other on-map encounter I could really think of, you know, through there. And then like and that also gets extrapolated on when you start to be able to like one-shot enemies just by running into them and stuff, which is when you're super over leveled, and it's funny and goofy.
Yeah, just the like satisfaction of seeing things run from you and then just
Kelly's on a power trip.
The turn-based combat was really unique too, because of how realistic the enemies were. You know, you had a stinky hippie or
retro new age hippie.
Yeah, yes, new retro age hippie. You had a tree. You fought a tree. You know, you fought oh gosh. There's too many different enemies.
Little puke.
Stinky pile of puke.
Yeah, little
pile of puke. A little pile of barf. The enemies were just so. I wanted to play through the battles, and I didn't really care if it took a little longer, because even just the battles themselves had unique dialogues to them, right?
Oh yeah.
And I also think of like in Mother 3 too, where you have enemies that I'm trying to think of what the enemy's name is. Like the really sad and depressed enemy that was just like, oh gosh, I want everything to end. Or it's just like
beat the shit out of me.
A giant head robot thing. It was very reminiscent of like Hitchhiker's Guide almost.
Yeah. Right. It's just so unique. I just couldn't stop. You know, I didn't care if I got in a random encounter.
Mm-hmm. Just seeing that, like seeing the enemy design was reward enough, I think.
And I feel like that was a carryover from Earthbound to Undertale that really still stuck strongly with me, was like the care to the enemy interactions within the battles that they wrote in.
Yeah, even more so, I think, than Earthbound. So I've always seen Earthbound. I guess I didn't quite realize this until I was a little older. Because I had played Dragon Quest 1 really early on. I think I was like 3 or 4 when I first played it. I knew it as Dragon Warrior, personally. But, Mother's battle system is, in essence, a kind of a mockery of Dragon Quest. Like the perspective, the way that they approach the encounters, slimes versus pukes. I swear that's intentional, dude. I swear it has to be. And so it's like it's satirizing everything itself. It makes fun of itself. It makes fun of Nintendo. There's Nintendo jokes all up on here. Like when you talk to the corporate guys, they're very obviously like Nintendo suits. It just, as I guess saturated with satire as they could be, but they were there. So yeah, wow. I whenever I talk about, I feel like Earthbound in theory is different than Earthbound in practice, though. It's like you can't. I feel like it is a little bit of a pretentious game in the sense that like you don't quite realize how strong it is until you step back from it and you think about it and discuss it.
I feel like it's one of the strong. I hate to. I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this up, but it's one of like the strongest cases for video games as art that I have in my mind, like personally.
I think
like
so too.
the experiential aspect of it, the way that you can look at it in different lights from different levels. Go ahead.
No, I was pointing. Sorry, I was pointing to slime because I forgot it was there
behind you.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just so many ways to experience it and bond with it. I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking now because I'm gonna get embarrassing.
No, you're right. I wouldn't belittle that because Earthbound is kind of like that painting that you're walking through a gallery and you look at, and part of you don't really know why you like it, but it makes you feel something that you can't really explain. And really, Earthbound is an experiential game.
Oh yes.
And like we've said before, right? The plot itself is rather generic. Everything individually in the moment in the game may seem kind of okay, yeah, that's cool, I guess. But the talking about it, this aspect that we're doing now, and really reflecting back on the experience that you had is what makes the game special.
Totally. And it's like, I have a lot of really special memories with like Mega Man or Final Fantasy and so on, but like with Earthbound, I just feel like those experiences are a lot more sort of generic. Like, oh, I remember really liking this game. I remember loving FF6. I remember like playing Zelda when I was a kid. But with Earthbound, I feel, and maybe it's because it literally is visceral because of the senses, but I feel like with Earthbound, my memories of Earthbound are a lot more just vivid and visceral, and there's a sad nostalgia to it too, because it is definitely, we've said this a million times on here, but it is very much like that representation of the 90s, a product of the 90s, and also like, like a satire of it. So it's like, but that memory, the game itself like reminds me of my memory of it, of that time, like the greens of youth or whatever, right? It's like I hear it, I feel it. It's like you can't really put a lot of it into words.
I hate to say it too. I'm not trying to look at it through rose-colored glasses or anything like that, but man, the 90s were freaking awesome. I really, in some respects, miss those days because of the relative simplicity. As much as I enjoy, like what we're doing right now, not being able to do anything like this in the 90s, and social media not being a thing, like part of me misses that in a way because it really, I feel like nowadays everything is so instant access that any theories you have or imagination you have, a lot of things can be solved by just looking up something really quick. But in the days of games like Earthbound, you really kind of had to sit and ponder on what you just played for an extended period of time and be like, wow. You talk with your friend, like, have you played this game? No, I haven't played it. Have you played this game? No, I haven't played it. And you're just thinking like, wow, what did this game really made me feel something. And there weren't all these theories out there that you could have read, easy access to. And
I mean,
it really
you
does
could
speak.
call the Nintendo Power line if you wanted to.
You could.
It's funny because again, this game came with a player's guide. And what an interesting player's guide, because it's not framed in a walkthrough way. It's framed as like a travel log, or like, it's so interesting. If you've never seen the player's guide and you're listening to this, please check it out, because it's like a work of art in and of itself. But even with that player's guide, there was still the element of, what is this? What does this do? Well, like, how do I figure this out? So that brings me to another question, because Kevin, you said that you played this when you were a little older, and Kelly, you said you played it when you were like it sounds like a year or so, a couple years after it came out. What was your experience? Did you ever talk about this game with anybody else when you guys were growing up and playing it?
Kelly, go first.
So the reason I don't know exactly when I played it for the first time is because my mom was the one who like owned the Super Nintendo. She was very into her RPGs, and like she got the games for her kids, but she was the one who was like in it, and I was just like, oh, this is cool. And so I had my mom to talk to about it, but it's not the same as like having like a peer group or like a fan base to bounce things off of. But it did make it feel like a little bit less, I guess I could say, lonely or even personal. Because that's one of the things that I was thinking of is when you have this game and no like wider like internet or social connections, it does feel like it's speaking to you in a very different way than if you're realizing like the full extent of the audience who are tuning in with you, I guess you could say. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm actually curious, especially about Kevin, because you mentioned so much about like, you were talking about like how now there's theories and stuff online, and it kind of kills the magic. But I feel like you said it yourself, like a lot of your experience with your content has been because of Earthbound. So is that? Yeah, I'm curious as to how that.
No, that's a good point. It's a good point. Back when I started to discover it late in middle school, high school kind of time frame, there wasn't really anybody I could talk about it with, because everybody was so focused on newer titles that they were like, I don't have time for that. What the heck are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about some Super Nintendo game. Have you seen this PS? Have you played GTA 3 yet? Like, this is the only thing that matters right now. Like,
Killing
I would go over to
hookers.
my buddy's house. Yeah, he would just sit there and steal cars and beat the crap out of people for hours. But yeah, what you said with the comment I made earlier about just so many theories going out there nowadays, yeah, it does kill the magic a little bit, but it also kind of extends the legacy of Earthbound, because I mean, there's theories that are out there now that I never even thought about. Theories about Gygas's origins, theories about the relation of Ninten and Ness from Mother to Mother 2. Maria and George, if you really go into the lore of Mother 1 and how they interacted with Geeg and how he became Gygas and things like that. It's just like stuff I never would have thought of when I was a little kid, mainly because I never played Mother 1. But
yeah, that's yeah.
I feel like more of the experiential part of it, like, wow, that was so creepy, but this part made me feel like a certain way. It was so quirky. That part of it's a little lost because it's kind of understood for everybody that's played the game. But when I was alone back in those days and I had played the game and I'm like, wow, has anybody else played this game? Like, am I the only one here? This is crazy stuff. That part of me it's lost. And that is kind of sad because, that's something that was really special at the time.
Yeah,
I think that's a really fascinating way to put it. Like the being solo playing it, having this really close lens on the experience and having the experience draw out, as opposed to having this wider group and then falling into more of like an extending phase where you're talking more, discussing more, digging into the details, as opposed to digging into the in the moment experience.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have at least one friend who played it during that time. And I think that like we just, we never really talked about it like we were kids, But I think we both had a similar situation where we kind of just didn't know what to make of the game, and like we liked it because it was an RPG and we liked RPGs, but like it was just a weird thing. And I remember to the rest of our friend group, no one really played it. It was obscure even then, because it wasn't like a sports game or like like a bigger action game or something like that. It wasn't
No,
Spawn.
You're right. I mean, it basically the extent of the theory conversations I had with my friends when I was in middle school was a Tool album that came out and that had an Area 51 recording at the end of it, and we were talking about, oh my gosh, is it real? I have no idea. Yeah, I don't miss those days.
Yeah, no, there's definitely something to be said about like discovering a Tool album for the first time. That's for sure. It's just the first one I ever bought was God, what was the one with Sober on it? It wasn't Lateralis. It was before Lateralis came out, and I remember like Undertow. Yeah, everybody describing that band as like so cool, but nobody could say why. Because you're like 7, or no, we were older than that. We were like I think 12 or 11, but like it was still like. And I feel like Earthbound kind of has that charm to it in a way too, because it's like you just implicitly like and hate it in the same way, just like kind of surface level.
Joey said it. Everybody likes Earthbound, likes Tool.
Yeah, dude. If you think about it,
I feel like that should be the like quote for this episode.
Wait, so what about people who like A Perfect Circle? Where does that fall in this analogy?
They're Mother 3 fans.
Okay, there you go. And then like what's Mother 1 then? King Crimson? Is that where this analogy is going?
Pucifer.
Oh yeah. Oh no, that's like. Ooh.
Oh, that's later.
Yeah, that would be like contrarians who like someone who says like a Mother. Like a Mother fan game is the best Mother game or something like that. That's
yeah, the Earthbound Halloween hack.
Right, exactly. Oh man. Well, I guess we're sort of running down on time. I feel like there's still a lot to talk about. Let's one last topic, I guess, and we'll try to keep this relevant to, I guess, contemporary 2021 conversation. What is the future, if any, for either Earthbound as a port or some kind of reinvigoration of the series? What is that a possibility? What's up?
No.
No.
I don't think that so what do we have on Nintendo Switch right now for Mother related content?
Smash Brothers? Question mark. That's as far as it goes. Yeah.
So I would say, based on the history of Nintendo, and what they've made pretty clear over the past or the last several years, I would expect to see maybe an Earthbound port to the Switch, and that's probably it. Personally, I don't see them ever porting Mother 3 to English. I think that was one of the only fan projects before Nintendo really started cracking down on DMCA violations with like AM2R when that came out with the Metroid 2 remake. Ironically, the video I'm posting on Friday is actually about the history of Mother 4 and its development. And kind of what happened with that and how it became oddity because they had to completely rebrand for obvious reasons for DMCA risk with Nintendo. But I really don't see anything that Nintendo can do with the Mother series, which is really unfortunate because I think if they did port it, it would sell. If they ported it as a separate title, because if you think about it, they have the Super Nintendo app on the Switch, but they don't have a Game Boy Advance version. If they just ported an English version of Mother 3, I think it would sell.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
But
And imagine if they took it one step farther and treated it the same way they treated the Earthbound release, where it had these like extra like player's guides and
I
oh
physical
think
yeah,
artifacts
I
that came
think
with
that's a
it.
possibility, to be honest with you. I think it's a
really,
possibility because I mean
I would
they
personally die. I would
I
die.
would
Just
be dead.
die.
I would
I'd be a
die.
dead person.
I mean, think about it because okay, Nintendo fucking loves money, you know? And the only
Do
reason
they
why
though?
yes they do. That is yes. um do they like making it uh do they know how to make it right in like in a predictable way? No, but they love it.
There we go. That's
Uh,
the
um
thing.
but I mean look at Fire Emblem 1's release. You know, that's so weird that got a
That's weird.
release. And it's like I feel like that's testing the waters for stuff like this. I mean, it's always been a series that I feel like that the one of the major reasons why they haven't really put out Mother 3 or released another port, why the ports don't come like as consistently, is because they're waiting for the right moment to capitalize and juice out every single dollar that they can. And I feel like I think that's the most important reason. I honestly believe that is the reason. I could be wrong. I don't know.
I don't know if they were going to do that though. I think they should have done it shortly after Undertale released.
Yeah,
There's something when the hype of that style of game is really out there, because I don't know, Undertale. I really never thought Undertale would be as big as it was.
same.
I'm happy that it was because of how interesting the game was and how it kind of paved the way for other games of a similar style. But I don't know when that window is going to happen, when they're going to be able to release something like that, because I feel like they could have already done
Could have
that.
done it.
Well, I mean, they have Deltarune in production. It could be an interesting companion piece to that. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
waiting for the time, waiting for Toby Fox to say it's okay to to release it. It's actually
Wait,
all
Well,
on him.
too, Mother 3 is a much more linear game than Earthbound is, in the respect that there's chapters, and it follows more of a story, more so than Earthbound, which is more of an exploratory
Hmm.
experience. I don't know. I'll never understand that. For as much as I've researched the series, I will never understand fully why they won't release Mother 3 in English.
American Pig
I,
Nazis? I don't know.
well, I feel like that's easily solvable. No, maybe not, but
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
No, it's why I think that Nintendo doesn't like money as much as Joey thinks they do. Like, I just give us Mother 3. It's so easy. I'm trying to give
Come
you
on.
my money, but you're making it so hard.
I don't know. They could always do a subscription service for the entire SNES library or Super Famicom library for $10 a month. I would probably subscribe to that, and they'd earn a crap ton of money.
That is, I'm telling you right now, that's the future, man. Just companies haven't figured out a way to regulate it yet, and until that happens, you know, we're stuck in this like weird limbo. And I think it sucks because Earthbound and Mother is like it's like trying to read canon literature without like A Tale of Two Cities or Shakespeare or something. You know, like it just feels like something is not there. Like I mean, you gave us Mario Sunshine, but we don't have we don't have Earthbound. And I'm not trying to be like I'm not trying to say that Mario Sunshine is a worse game or a better game or whatever, but it just seems like you're
Strange
just
choice.
yeah, and just you're just not putting you have this material and you're just not using it, and you could be making money off of it and you could be making fans happy, but instead you want to strike down fan shit and like pursue useless lawsuits that probably did more for your products than more positive things for your products than harm. But I digress.
There's a secret. There's a secret. Plethora of people in Nintendo that have boxed copies of Earthbound that are reselling on eBay. And they really don't want to destroy the magic of that. I heard that theory on Starman.net.
I'm sure you did.
It's got to be true. I saw it on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Starman.net has like a special animosity, like a special place to hold those feelings.
Well, then that's an interesting subject too, because it's like that just speaks to, when people are always like, how come, there's not more ports of games that never got released here? What people would just, people would translate it for free. And it's like, it's not quite that simple, but at the same time, it should be that simple. So there we are.
I remember getting the email like saying that the Starman.net fans translation of Mother 3 was ready and like losing it and being like, okay, well, I guess I know what my next like week is.
No, you're right. And it's not like selling the translated version of Radical Dreamers is going to sell as well as selling the translated version of Mother 3.
Yeah. Radical Dreamers, awesome soundtrack. Like, I cannot play. I can't. I can't.
It's not very good.
I can't. It's like an ancient VN. I don't have fun playing. It is really cool to see how those characters became Chrono Cross characters, and like how much more cogent of a story Chrono Cross could have been. But that's another subject for another time.
I'm kind of curious before we sign off. I want to know what y'all's favorite iteration of your favorite thing was for your ultimate spell on Earthbound when they're asking at the beginning.
That's a good question. As a kid, I don't remember. I always say reverb now because I'm an idiot. So it's side reverb or whatever.
Reverb.
I think I said pasta as a kid. I don't remember.
Yeah. PSI fart face.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah.
So appropriate.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So
I
good.
was
So
like,
good.
I was a teenager. I thought it was funny.
Oh, well, speaking of,
I'm still laughing.
I mean, the character's name is Pooh. I thought that was the funniest, absolute funniest thing ever because I was like a boy, like a stupid boy. So obviously I thought that was funny. Yeah, Kelly, what was yours?
Dude, I think when I was a kid, I just went with presents because I loved presents. And then when I was a pretentious college kid, I went with Russian literature.
You can't fit that!
It says Ruslit, R-U-S-L-I-T.
Is it like a potato, like russet?
It was a move. I did it. I'm not proud of it, but here it is.
Oh, I'm just
PSI rough
The
it.
internet. Ruslit. That's fine. Don't worry about it.
That is the most like white college student thing I've ever heard, and I fucking love it. Liberal arts school. Yes, it's so good. Oh my god.
PSI ascot.
Oh man, and that's coming from somebody who names there's like I've named my Pokemon after like film directors throughout the ages, so I feel you.
The potential is real.
My dogs are named Duke Wellington and Grover Cleveland, so I get you.
There you go. Awesome. Well, I hate cutting these short too because it's like it keeps going on. But anything else that we want to say before we wrap up here?
No. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the talks. Hope to be on again. Everybody check out Press Start to Continue, new YouTube channel. According to Joey, we're going places.
Yes.
That remains to be seen. New videos whenever I feel like it. That's my new motto. I tried for one a week, but that was a little too lofty.
It hurts. Yeah, no, please follow him on YouTube and Twitter. What is your Twitter again?
It's PSTC channel. Because that's the only thing that I could do that wasn't taken.
It's the way it goes.
It is what it is, and YouTube is a very very strange place, and I've been very fortunate for a lot of the videos that I've had. I think I found a niche, and I hope everybody enjoys it.
Awesome. And Kelly, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me at cone_dog DAWG on Twitter. And that's about it. I don't do much. I'll make you a perler bead of Ness if you ask.
Can you make me one?
Absolutely, I can.
If you live in the area, I'll even come pick it up. You don't have to ship it to me.
Ooh, yeah.
You are not far.
Valentine's not far from Uptown.
Mm-mm.
Well,
Nice.
comparatively.
Age and location reveal. Damn. There you go.
Well, I'm also 32, so I can't really say much.
Shit. Okay, I guess I have to admit that I'm 32. I think I've done that before, but I'll reiterate
We're
it.
all the same age. It's
Yeah.
like it's a high school reunion in different
Damn.
high schools.
Damn. And as always, you can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/podcastjump, Apple, Google Podcasts, not hyphenated, two different things. Also on YouTube and Twitch. And thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks Kelly for stopping in and like chatting some puke and boogers.
Gotten some puke.
And yeah, we'll be doing this again tomorrow. I've got another guest. I think we're going to be talking about Mario Galaxy. So there it is. All right. Have a good night, guys.